Imagine an ancient human showing up in your bedroom right now. He doesn't scream. He doesn't attack. He just watches you reach for a glowing rectangle before you've even said good morning to a single living creature. Your eyes aren't fully open yet, but your thumb already knows the way. The ancient human notices this, and quietly, he starts to worry. Of course, we can't know exactly what a prehistoric human would think of your phone. There are no Stone Age reaction videos. But we can ask a safer question. What about your phone addiction would seem completely bizarre to someone who has never seen a screen? And the answer, honestly, is almost everything. You check your phone before getting out of bed. You check it again in the bathroom. You check it again in the elevator, even though you know nobody has texted you in the last 40 seconds. The ancient human watches this ritual with the same expression he'd have if you were licking a rock repeatedly, hoping it would eventually taste better. For him, attention always had a purpose. Looking at the bushes meant scanning for danger. Looking at the sky meant predicting rain. Looking at another human meant figuring out if they were a friend, a threat, or just also hungry. But staring at a rectangle that has no smell, no weather, and never tries to bite you, that wasn't covered in his survival manual. Neuroscientist Earl Miller from MIT has spent years studying how the human brain handles attention and distraction. According to him, the brain was never built for true multitasking. It simply switches rapidly between tasks, and every switch comes with a cost. You think you're just checking your phone for a second. Your brain thinks it's rebooting an entire computer every 8 seconds. The ancient human watches you do this dance. Work, phone, work, phone. He doesn't understand the work. He understands the phone even less. To him, you look like an animal that stops eating every 2 bites to check whether food still exists somewhere in the forest. And then comes the part that genuinely alarms him. The notification, that short sound, that little light, that subtle vibration. You stop whatever you're doing, mid-sentence, mid-meal, mid-conversation with an actual flesh-and-blood human being, just to check whether someone, somewhere on the planet, liked a photo of you from 3 days ago. Researcher Catherine Price, who studies the impact of technology on attention, describes this pattern as an intermittent reward system. The same mechanism, she explains, that makes slot machines so hard to walk away from. You never know when the reward is coming, so you keep checking, just in case. The ancient human never needed a slot machine to understand risk and reward. He had wolves for that. It's worth remembering that slot machines were deliberately engineered by people who study exactly this kind of behavior, designed to maximize the time someone spends pulling a lever without noticing how much time has passed. Your favorite app was built using the exact same logic, except now the lever is your own thumb, and the casino is the screen in your bedroom. But hold on. Ancestral life wasn't some paradise of Zen focus and total presence either. There was hunger, cold, parasites, and probably someone in the group who snored too loudly next to the fire. Distraction existed back then too. It just usually had a concrete reason behind it. A strange noise, a different smell, a shadow that shouldn't have been there. Today, your distraction has a name. It's called just one more video. The ancient human follows you to work and notices something even stranger. You're sitting down, in front of a screen, next to other screens. And every so often, you pick up a smaller screen to rest from the bigger one. He watches this for a while and finally whispers, "You're escaping one box of light by staring into a smaller box of light." And honestly, he's not wrong. Psychologist Larry Rosen, who has studied behavior and technology for decades, describes this pattern as digital separation anxiety, a genuine physical discomfort when the phone is out of reach, even for just a few minutes. Your body literally reacts as if something essential is missing. Most of the time, though, the only thing actually missing is your patience for 2 minutes without stimulation. The ancient human never felt anxious about being away from a specific rock. He felt anxious about being away from food, water, or the rest of the group. Things that, would actually kill him if they kept being missing. Modern researchers have a term for this too, separation anxiety, the same clinical category once reserved for toddlers and puppies, now casually applied to fully grown adults whose phone battery has dropped below 20%. The ancient human would find this deeply confusing, mostly because he never once cried over a rock running out of charge. To understand the scale of the problem, the numbers help. Screen use studies, including research compiled by behavioral scientists at Stanford University, suggest the average person checks their phone somewhere between 50 and 100 times a day. 100 times. The ancient human, during an entire day of hunting, might scan the horizon a fraction of that. And he's genuinely searching for something that could either kill him or feed him. You're scanning the digital horizon 100 times just to discover nobody commented on your breakfast photo. And the worst part isn't even the frequency, it's the timing. The brain releases dopamine not exactly when the reward arrives, but in the moment of anticipation. According to research on variable reward systems, that means the most pleasurable moment isn't reading the message. It's the split second before you know whether a message exists at all. You're not addicted to notifications. You're addicted to the tiny dramatic pause right before them. The ancient human would understand that feeling perfectly, because it's exactly the same sensation as waiting to see whether the trap caught anything. The difference is that his trap, eventually, stopped vibrating. Then comes lunch. You sit down to eat, and before the first bite, the phone is already on the table, screen up, glowing like a small, demanding little altar. You eat while looking at it. It watches you eat. Nobody is actually paying attention to the food. The ancient human, who likely hunted, processed, and cooked that meal with his own hands, would be genuinely confused watching you ignore your plate to look at pictures of other people's food. He follows you into the living room afterward and discovers something even more peculiar. You're not alone, but you're not exactly together either. There are other people in the room, each one staring at their own rectangle, in complete silence. 4 bodies on the same couch, 0 conversations happening. The ancient human watches this for far too long and finally concludes, quietly, that you may have invented an entirely new way of being alone in a group. Psychologist Sherry Turkle from MIT has studied exactly this phenomenon for over a decade. She describes how people can be physically present yet emotionally absent so consistently that the pattern earned its own name. Alone together, she calls it. For an ancient human who depended on the group's constant attention to survive, the idea of deliberately ignoring the person right next to you in order to focus on someone miles away would probably look like a serious evolutionary failure of priorities. But the day isn't over yet. You go out to meet a friend. You sit face to face at a real restaurant with real food in the real physical world. And at some point, both phones end up on the table. Every now and then, one of them buzzes, and the conversation pauses, not because it's urgent, just because it's possible. The ancient human watches this gap repeat itself several times during the same meal and starts to wonder whether that little rectangle might actually be the most important guest at the table, and the two of you just polite extras. At night, you finally let yourself rest. You tell yourself, just 5 more minutes of phone before sleep. 40 minutes later, you're still scrolling, watching videos of people organizing refrigerators you will never personally know. The ancient human watches this in complete silence and finally asks the only question that makes sense to him. Do you all love this part, or is it just me? Because here's the strange part of all this. Ancient humans didn't have phone addiction because they didn't have phones, but they did have the exact same brain you have right now. The same reward system, the same relentless curiosity for novelty, the same difficulty ignoring a bright, unpredictable stimulus. You're not weaker than your ancestors. You were simply born into a world deliberately designed to exploit exactly those weaknesses. So, no, the ancient human probably wouldn't call you a failure. He'd probably say you built the most efficient hunting tool in history. Except this time, you're the one being hunted. And here, maybe, is the cruelest irony of the whole story. The ancient human spent much of his day trying not to get eaten by something. You spend much of your day trying, mostly without success, not to get consumed by an app. He ran from predators with teeth. You run, unsuccessfully, from a little red icon with a number inside it. Both of you lose sometimes. The difference is that his predator at least had the decency to show up only once in a while. Yours lives in your pocket, all day long, waiting for the right moment. There's even a name for the specific fear of being without your phone. Nomophobia, short for no mobile phone phobia. studied by behavioral researchers since the early 2010s. The ancient human, ironically, had very specific fears too. Fear of the dark, fear of unfamiliar sounds in the brush, fear of someone snoring loud enough to attract something big and hungry. None of his fears depended on a battery sitting at 20%. And maybe that's the strangest part of the whole comparison. His fears existed to keep him alive. Your fear of being without your phone exists, basically, to keep you tethered to a social network that will forget you exist within minutes. And at the end of the day, right before finally setting the phone down on your nightstand, you might catch yourself thinking the exact same thing he thought at the very beginning. The moment he watched you grab that glowing rectangle before saying good morning to a single living creature. The question isn't why he found it strange. The question is why you don't anymore.